Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
We're back.
Yay.
Got another show.
Hooray.
I think this is a sequential week. I don't know, like weekends and weeks just bleed together now.
I was going to say, like, this is probably like the most like especially now, I look forward to doing the show every week. Just because it's like the one outlet of like, wow, I get to fucking talk to someone who's not my dog.
Well, if anything, it's the one day of the week that I know what day of the week it is, because the show's like the landmark for the calendar for me. But
today is like really the first day I've really like that kind of stir craziness, and you know, I'm working throughout all this, so like my work routine and my days off haven't really changed since all this started, but it's just like, fuck, I can't do anything different than like I either go to work or I stay home. And it's
right. Well,
like I'm going to run my head through a wall.
Like when this stuff first like came down, you know, we were talking, or just the general thing was like, look, yeah, you got to be safe in quarantine, but there's things you can do. Like if you go outside, as long as it's not like a crowded park or a playground or this or that, like there's things you can do. And then the weather, at least around here, was like, ha ha ha, nuh-uh. Like the low tonight is supposed to be down in the like high 20s, low 30s. And
that's the thing, but it's like you could go outside and do what? What the fuck am I going to do? Like, all people are doing right now is like yard work and shit. And it's like, I hate yard work. I'd rather die inside. Like,
I have a friend that I was talking to a couple weeks ago over, not Discord, but whatever. I think we used Google Hangouts or something. And he had mentioned that. He's like, oh, yeah, that's the one plus side is like you almost like look forward to doing yard work now. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, you might, but I still hate it. And yeah, and I don't know. The longer this goes, the more I'm getting to that point where I'm outside. You know, I do it about once a week on usually Saturday or Sunday if we get a nice day. That's the other, like I said, the problem is we'll get like one nice day a week. So you have to do everything on that day. You can't be like, oh, I'll mow today and I might work on the garden tomorrow or this or that. It's like, no, I'll be outside for 8 hours.
Yeah.
But the last time I had to do that, I was kind of okay with it. So maybe my mind is broken now and I'm getting to that point, but I sure wasn't when he said that comment. It's like, nope. But yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well,
it's terrible is what it is. Yeah. So let's talk.
That's true.
Let's tell a story to put this unpleasantness behind us and temporarily and move on to another type of unpleasantness.
Yeah, I do have one this week too. I had come across two different like possible topics like right after I did my last one, and we try to alternate weeks for people that don't listen to the show. So that means like if I go 1 week, I got 2 weeks really to get something together. But as we talked about, you'd like to wait till like the day before or the day, almost last minute, because then it keeps it fresh in your brain. It just makes it, I think it brings more energy to it for me anyway. Because
right.
It's like that's the kind of student.
Well, it's kind of like talking to somebody about something you just read about, right. Casually. It's like you're way more energetic and the information is way fresher when you can be like, yeah, he fucking chopped off 16 heads, including his own.
The fastest knife in the
in the Old West.
No, those were balls, not heads. But yeah, so I had two possible topics saved up, and then this morning, like I wanted to do it yesterday. I do like to try to do it the day before just to give myself a little bit of a cushion, and I didn't. We've been so busy; it's been ridiculous. That's what a lot of people complaining about the like quarantine and stuff. And I get if you're not working, that sucks. I feel very bad for those people. I'm fortunate to still be working, but for some reason, my job has become like 8 times harder, and not because of like I'm not working from home or anything like that. It was just volume wise. So today I'm trying to put something together, and I get to my first of the two possible topics, and it was one of those things where you're like, this will be an awesome topic. I was so excited about the other one, and then you start like looking it up and you're like, there's no way I can turn this into a story. And it's like, well, fuck. So I turned to the second one, and I am very happy with the second story.
Turns out there's a story about two brothers.
So the history of alcohol is long and interesting, but what's equally as long and way more interesting is the history of what people have done when under the influence of alcohol. So this week, we're going to take a look at a specific conflict that was part of the broader Austro-Turkish War, which was fought between the Habsburg monarchy.
This ends with two white dudes starting a variety show podcast as the outcome.
It does.
Alcohol.
It's our origin story.
Yeah.
It's a bit.
I was going to say, this already sounds really familiar.
So it's between the Habsburg monarchy, which was a name that used to encompass the various kingdoms that spanned the area, better known as Austria, and the Ottoman Empire, which I think a lot of us are familiar with if you're into history at all. The war itself raged from 1788 through 1791, when it was ended with the signing of the Treaty of Sistova. The conflict had little overall effect on Habsburg's territories. They didn't really gain much. They didn't lose much, which is what you want out of a 4 or 5 year war. I guess 3-year war, but still.
Sometimes you just gotta, fight off that adrenaline,
Kill a bunch of people and have a bunch of your own people killed just to keep fresh.
Stay limber, stay loose, fellas. We gotta.
And then the effect on the Ottoman Empire is a little more complicated because, as we all know, they were at war with a lot of people. So, like many wars, the Austro-Turkish War left a lasting legacy filled with tales of heroes and valor. But the battle that we're examining today has neither of those things.
I'll be the judge of that. I'll find a hero in this bitch.
So, the Battle of Karansebes took place on the night of September 21st.
You are a master of finding stories with names just like...
I know.
Destined to fuck up your tongue.
That one, I still stumbled through it, and that was with me putting a phonetic spelling next to the name because I knew it was going to be a problem.
That's like training wheels, like just falling off your bike, and then the regular wheels fall off.
Too. Well, that's the problem with that is you put the phonetic spelling next to it, but then that messes up your reading flow, because your eyes have to skip over a word, and I literally had to pull up a video on YouTube with somebody talking about this topic. I'm like, I don't know how this is pronounced. I'm going with how they said it, and then that's not how they said it, but whatever.
No, that you're looking up a video for reference and then being like, no, they must be wrong.
Yeah. So, Karansebes. I don't think I have to say... Oh, no, I do have to say it right in the very next sentence. But it took place on September 21st, on the night of September 21st, 1788, which means it would have been one of the earliest... That was the first year of this war that the battle was part of. The fight centered around the town of Karansebes, which is why it's called the Battle of that place.
The Battle for Karansebes.
That's a area in a town in the southwest region of present-day Romania. There where the Timis and Sebes River meet. About 100,000 of Habsburg soldiers were setting up camp around the city in preparation to defend it from the coming attack of the Ottoman Empire. So, of course, part of these preparations included sending out a number of scouting parties in search for signs of the advancing enemy. And as part of this effort, a unit of hussars, I don't know how it's pronounced, but light cavalry soldiers set out
hosers.
from the... Yeah, hosers. They were the Canadian branch. They set out across the aforementioned Timis River. Once on the other side, they came across a group of Romanis who were just locals, not involved in the battle in any way. But these Romanis offered to sell the soldiers some of their liquor. Some accounts say they gave it to them, but most likely they sold it to them. And of course, the soldiers were happy to purchase it.
That's shady. If we can't find a paper trail, it's like, how'd they buy this? Sexually,
what money did they
obviously.
use? Yeah, obviously. Soldiers were known to be nice to people and just pay for stuff and not just take it because they were the armed ones. But So, of course, the soldiers partook in the offer and immediately started enjoying their newly purchased booze. So while the hussars were busy drinking, a second group of Habsburg soldiers, this time an infantry unit, made their way across the river. When they saw this cavalry unit living it up, literally just like partying, they demanded to be included. But the hussars, who were quite drunk, said, "Fuck that, go get your own booze."
Which is just how you start any bar fight. And like, that's the tradition that's continued for years.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So the infantrymen refused to leave. The hussars, being drunk and being very, very adamant that they were not going to share, began hastily and drunkenly constructing fortifications around their stash. So this
like
group
Command
of soldiers
and Conquer, but just for like a few boxes of booze.
Booze, right. Which is funny to me because it's like, this all started with like, we know we're going to be attacked in the next couple days. We know the enemy's coming. And it's like, hey, some booze, get the fuck away. Let's build a wall around our booze. Screw you guys.
Turns us all into like Y2K conspiracy theories. Like, keep your mitts off my booze.
So, of course, that pissed off the infantry. And I would say, I wrote tensions began to escalate, but obviously they were already escalated.
As most, like, you know, drunken conflicts tend to build up. They don't actually build up. It's just everything's cool, and then you're in a conflict.
Yeah, like, I imagine they were over there, like, drunk, and they see their fellow infantry coming across the river, and they were like, "Hey, guys, we love you. You guys are great." And they're like, "Cool, can we have a drink?" "Fuck you!"
Yeah, just like 1 minute later, it turns into, like, just like that fucking death stare from across the party, and be like, "You fucking judging me?" And that's how fast it happens. Next thing you know, you're getting like hockey punched.
So you can probably see where this is going, but before it goes there, I need to stop to point something out. The infantry units that had come across the river and wanted some of this booze was composed of Austrian, Serb, Croat, Italian, and other soldiers of various minorities. One of the other things I read pointed out that this army, because this was the Habsburg kingdom was really just like the name for a group of, you know, an area of Europe at the time. There was people from like France and Germany, those areas. I don't know which specific countries, but at least the ones I just listed off. Which, like, that's an ethnic diversity in the workplace that we'd probably applaud today. But the problem at the specific time is that these many groups could not speak or understand the languages spoken by the other people in the groups. So you had an infantry that, like, different sections of it couldn't understand the other sections, which is not necessarily ideal when you're leading an army into battle. But anyway, as tempers began to flare, and while everyone was focused on the argument over liquor, a shot suddenly rang out. The soldiers still stationed back at the camp on the other side of the river heard the shot and shouted, "Turks, Turks," which, as you may remember, were the actual enemies that they were there to fight. And the drunken hussars or whatever, the cavalrymen and the infantrymen on the forward side, the ones that were fighting over the booze, heard the alarms and being sounded back at camp and thought that the battle must have begun. And that scared the crap out of them because they were busy, you know, arguing with each other, and half of them were drunk. So they began frantically fleeing back towards the camp. Chaos ensued as the troops in the camp were convinced that they were surrounded by enemy soldiers. In the darkness of the night, anything that moved became a target and was quickly fired upon, including the drunken and not drunken soldiers coming across the river, which in the dark had been mistaken for the advancing Ottoman army. So, not really what you want to happen.
No, I love when a plan comes together. Jesus Christ.
And it's just, reading through this, you can really sense the fact that nobody anywhere had any clue what the fuck they were doing. which is hilarious to me because at the end of the day, they were preparing for battle. It wasn't like they didn't know they were at war, but they were
fucking instant alcoholics the moment they were introduced to any booze.
And then as soon as fighting broke out, they didn't really seem to know how to respond in any sensible way.
Again, that's also hitting kind of the checklist of drunken conflicts is...
Well, but remember, at
once
this point,
the conflict
only a small
starts,
group of people are drunk. The rest of them are just fucking... They don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but do you know what's going on? Have you ever been sober and like dealing with people who've been fucked up? It's like you don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. You just know it's going to keep going on until like they're dead or they pass out.
Somebody stops it, right? So among all the chaos, there were some officers who were probably not happy that their troops who had been deployed to defend the city were now largely running away or firing wildly, attempted to bring order. But apparently their shouts of halt, halt were mistaken as shouts of Allah, Allah, which had the opposite of a... I know.
Those don't sound
alike. But again, remember
too,
nobody spoke the same fucking language. But the problem with mistaking what they were shouting as Allah, Allah is, of course, the enemy that you're fighting was Muslim.
You know what? I get the feeling. One time I was like, hey, guys, and they swore I said, Hail Hitler. And they threw me off a fucking bridge.
Yeah. So as the drunken cavalrymen retreated through the camp on their horses, a commander of artillery thought it was an advance by the Turkish cavalry and began ordering mortars to be fired. At what and where? Who the fuck knows? Because they obviously couldn't clearly see a target. Otherwise, they would understand that was their own guys. But I just love this idea of, oh my God, horses, just fire.
Be sure not to shoot until you can imagine the white of their eyes as they see a mortar coming for them.
Yeah. So now there's just like gunshots and screaming and retreating and cannon fire, mortars, whatever, and nobody's aiming at anything in particular. It's just they're convinced that they're under attack.
Don't shoot until you can see it working in your head.
So other soldiers who had been asleep, given that it was in the dead of night, were awoken by the commotion of battle and stumbled out of their tents to join the hectic scene. But as the battle grew more and more intense, eventually the entire army was forced to retreat. So that left the city, they just all ran away. Literally the whole army, the 100,000 guys that were stationed there to protect this one city.
They don't know what's going on, but they do know they're overrun.
Right.
And then over their head.
And it's true. And when you sense that the battle is not going in your favor, it's probably as smart to retreat.
Yeah, but usually you would know, like for sure.
Well, like I said, it apparently was not the A team of the Habsburg army or the B team or even I think these were the volunteers. But the problem with all of this, well, there are a lot of problems, but the biggest thing was that the initial shot and then the shout of Turks, Turks seemed like it was actually just a ploy by some of the infantrymen to distract the Hussars so that they could get the booze. So basically it was like, oh no, here come the enemy. Let's steal the booze.
You're going to have to focus on this shot.
But it worked too fucking well. Either they failed to share their plan with the others or the others had failed to understand it due to the fact that nobody spoke the same language, which led to basically everybody thinking they were under attack. So quickly the same soldiers were indeed under fire, but unfortunately it was from their own confused comrades, obviously. And it literally escalated to the point where the battle with themselves became so violent that they forced themselves to retreat from themselves.
And really, that's just a great reality analogy for, inner conflict. We're always fighting with ourselves and forcing ourselves to retreat.
Yeah, we can't win. We just take massive casualties until we back off and try again sometime.
So really, this isn't a story about dumbass booze hounds and like the people desperate for alcohol. This is a story about people fighting with their true nature.
You know what? It is kind of...
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So the Ottoman army did in fact march on the city a few days later. But when they arrived to find the battlefield littered with dead and dying Austrian soldiers, they were probably pretty confused, but they also probably didn't care that much. They were able to easily take the city, of course, because the entire army had retreated.
Yeah.
In fairness, judging by their actions of the Habsburgian soldiers, they probably would have faced a similar, if not worse fate, had they stuck around and actually try to fight the Ottomans, because they do not seem like the most disciplined or coordinated army. So some accounts say as few as 150 soldiers were killed, but other accounts list up to 10,000 self-inflicted casualties. Unfortunately, the incident was not particularly well documented. Some historians think that it may have never actually happened. The first written account of the battle doesn't show up until about 40 years after the battle supposedly took place. But it's not one of these stories where I get to the end and I'm like, haha, but it didn't really happen. Here's the reality.
That would be a lame one to make up,
Yeah. Most historians think it probably did. Now, the whole, how drunk were they? Was it about booze? Was it just,
maybe booze was a factor, but more likely it was just a military panic.
Frankly, at the time, I would imagine that booze played a role in just about every human conflict. Because, really, they traveled with a lot because it kept better than water. Yeah. Which would, of course, go bad.
That's the thing they're not telling us about modern war, is that oil is delicious and gets you so fucked up.
And certainly, it is realistic. It has happened in well-documented cases where armies fire upon themselves, not understanding that they're both on the same side. I can think of a lot of, there's the Pat Tillman stuff from recent memory, back in I can't remember if that was the Iraq War or the Gulf War, but really they're the same fucking war because it won't end. So it probably did happen. Personally, I like to think that the booze is always involved in these things, so I'm going to go with that.
But I love the idea of two people that's your only beef in the heat of warfare is hey man, can I have a drink? No. And it's we're on the same side. That turns into give me a drink or I'll shove this bayonet up your fucking ass.
Which is, like I said, it makes it extra great. Because I can see, I've known guys that have been in the service in various branches, and I know how those guys get. And I totally see that when it's on your off duty, hours. Some of the buddy that was in the Navy, and the stories he tells are just, frankly, you could make a pretty amazing book out of them. But that's when you're stuck with other soldiers and there's no combat and there's long periods of just work and nothing and tempers flare, and they're the type of people, a lot of, soldiers tend to be the confrontational type. That's why that's the kind of their job. So I see that. But when you're literally preparing, when the enemy is at least, a couple days away, but they thought the battle
you're
might happen as early as the next day.
Learned that the enemy was among them.
The absolute funniest part about all this is the booze in question is said to be schnapps. So I don't know about you, but schnapps aren't my favorite booze. That's the kind of thing that I drank when I first started drinking alcohol because it's basically totally. Alcoholic sugar.
Yeah, that's the shit that there's always for some reason 3 bottles in your parents' liquor cabinet because they don't like that shit either. Yeah,
there's one obscure cocktail that calls for 3 drops of peach schnapps, so you buy it and you're like, I'm never going to drink the rest of this. It's gross. But so that puts it into even better perspective, is that all of this happened over a fight for schnapps.
Yeah.
I'd like to think
it was fair. If it was the last
pucker
fucking booze available, I would fight for it.
Yeah, that's true. But like I said, it is also interesting to think of. It's as bad as this was, as just a clusterfuck of confusion and stupidity and infighting that led to literally deaths. It wasn't we just ran
only
away.
For one of those cavalry guys would be oh fuck, peppermint, gross.
Yeah, they dumped it all out. I want to see. That's probably what confused the soldiers back at camp. Is I imagine these cavalrymen coming back across this river, holding barrels over their head, drunkenly slurring like, "Oh, and it looks like that it's the enemy advancing with like powder kegs of bombs or something, and just schnapps." But so that's what I have. It's not the longest story in the history of the world, but I'm up for a good drunken military brawl any day.
I mean, like, you know, if you could just like get both sides to have those incidences, like, so you're saying it's like a 4-year war, and it's like, how much of that time was spent in dumb conflicts that you accidentally manufactured with your own side? Like,
neither side. That's the funny part. At the time, it had been like, "Oh, you time travel." And we're like, "This is the Austrian-Ottoman War," and they're like, "What? We're at war?"
Yeah.
Like maybe there wasn't an actual war; they just kept fighting themselves, and we construe it as a war now.
Yeah.
But
people bring up if you could time travel, you know, like what evil figure would you take out, or what event would you change? I would literally go and just get a safe spot and watch this happen. For my entertainment. I wouldn't affect change at all.
Yeah, you don't want to change it because then that'd be disappointing.
Also,
plus, who knows the long-term repercussion, right?
Like you find out, like, oh shit, if I go tell them, like, hey, you're just drunk, like you're just fighting each other, like then you find out, like, oh, I wouldn't exist.
Watching, I mean, obviously, if you could do that, you know, you pose that question, the first answer is always like, go back and find Hitler and convince him to grow a handlebar mustache instead of the Hitler mustache. Just because I want to see how much that. I know. I think it would have.
Like if he embraced looking actually like early 1900s dapper, then he probably wouldn't have been such a piece of shit.
Right. And like if you come back to the future, the
sunnier side of life.
If you come back to the future and it didn't work, you can always go back and finish the job. But like, I think that's what I'd be most curious about. If you change something seemingly unconsequential like that, does it have any long-term
I could totally like start like a goddamn newsletter pretending to be like some hair expert and being like, what does your mustache say about you? And then, like, we would analyze Hitler and be like, look at the firm, straight lines. There's no levity. There's no amusement in Hitler. He doesn't let happiness in.
Yeah, something like that. Where I'm trying to think, like, I wouldn't necessarily mess with what's his name, Attila the Hun.
You shouldn't mess with Attila the Hun.
Yeah, I got distracted by...
Because Attila the Hun would fuck you up. I'd probably
where I was going with that is I think if I remember correctly, that army was credited with inventing the hamburger, which, not the sandwich, but, you know, basically ground preserved meat. But I don't want to screw with hamburger. Anything that risks me coming back to the future and there not being hamburgers, I can't take that risk. I don't know. I don't know where
there's a lot of like political families that I'd probably want to go back in time and just relentlessly bully like whoever the like father would be who started it all, and just kick him in the dick until he couldn't have kids again, and then vanish.
But again, that's the funny.
I would be willing to sacrifice my presence in the timeline.
Yeah.
To get rid of some of the fucking people who run shit in this country.
And then I'm trying to think of, there's so many like great mysteries too that you could go back and solve, and then you'd come back and probably just like jump off a cliff when you're disillusioned when you find out like all these great like human mysteries are just like, oh, just some guy did it one day. He was bored. Like,
yeah, just be like, what's that guy, D.B. Cooper? Just be like, yeah, he fucking he died in the woods. You know? He jumped out of the plane with a ton of money and broke his shit, and he's fucked. Yeah.
Parachute didn't work.
Kind of what I'd just be sitting next to him, this time traveler, and be like, you know, on a podcast, I told a story about parachutes. He'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? I need help.
That would be a great thing, is you go get, what's his name? Franco Federico, whatever, the guy you talked about last week.
Franz Reichelt.
Franz, yeah. You go back and get his suit and take it to the future and give it to DB Cooper.
You don't want that shit. You're going to want something that's all contained in the suit.
Look at all these pockets.
Don't get me wrong. You're going to look like if Batman were shaped like a rhombus. It's not gonna make sense until you're out of the plane.
I didn't think about it, but that suit looks like what you would get if Batman pissed off Alfred and he wanted to passively aggressively get back at him.
Yeah. That's not passive aggressive. That's like sabotage assassin. Because it's like, you're going to jump off a rooftop with that shit. So if Alfred did that to Batman.
Well, I think Bruce would know that it's not going to work, but what would happen is he didn't know it was altered. So then, like, Joker comes up to something and he slides down his bat pole and he goes to put the suit on and he's like, well, fuck, I've got to wear it. I can't let everybody know who I am.
That was the scene missing from, like, Batman Begins, is like him wearing just a puffy dumbass suit that doesn't work.
Bruce Wayne mysteriously showed up at Wayne Enterprises in a full body cast.
Bruce Wayne crashed through 3 floors today.
When asked what the hell he was doing, he says, I'm not Batman.
He said, I'm rich.
I'm rich. Well,
and nobody asked any other questions.
I was going to say, yeah, nobody would follow that up with any question.
I'd be like, oh, yeah.
I mean, frankly, if Elon Musk jumped off a building and tried to, like, Batman glide down to the ground, would you question that?
If Elon Musk actually, like, put his money where his mouth is and, like, was actually trying to innovate, he would still be a dumbass, but it would be like, I at least respect how much of a dumbass he is. Like, if he was trying to become a superhero, great. Yeah. Like, that's way better than your shitty cars that kill people.
You know what, though? We could probably convince him to become a superhero. Like, he seems like mentally he's at that point where he could be convinced to do about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if his cars have actually killed anybody, but they seem dangerous.
Well, I mean, technically, I'm sure people have died in and around Teslas, but, like, if it's any higher than the number of people that
die in, like, a Ford or something, yeah.
Right. I don't know.
Let's be honest, you never die in a Ford, because Ford is the sturdiest, most reliable pickup truck in the world.
There is one really good thing about Teslas, is that you can park your regular car, like, sideways across 4 Tesla charging spots and just watch everybody that's rich get pissed off.
Yeah. And for a brief moment, they know how I feel all the time, living with them.
Right. Be like, it does feel good to do whatever the hell you want, whenever you want.
You're right. Now I'm going to take your mansion.
Anyway.
So this has been the Class Warfare podcast.
If you take one thing away from this week's episode, it's get drunk and fight.
Come to our next meeting where we'll show you how to make a Molotov out of things from home. From schnapps. Yeah, I guess we're done. All right. Bye. All right.